This is part 1 of topic 3, perfect competition, and in this particular lecture we're looking at the various market structures in microeconomics. There's 4 key market structures. We're then looking at the assumptions of the perfect competition model, and we're looking at the perfect competition model itself, and the final 3 topics in this lecture series will be covered in separate presentations. So the market structures that we'll be dealing with in this course are perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly and monopoly. But right now we want to focus on perfect competition. So the types of products that we're talking about are fruit and vegetables, so a homogeneous type of product. The other key features of perfect competition, there are many buyers and many sellers. Homogeneous product or a standardized product, no barriers to entry or exit, so firms are free to enter or exit a perfectly competitive market, and in the long run there's break-even profit. So the assumptions of perfect competition, why they're important. First of all, the firms sell a homogeneous product, so all of the products are the same. So we're talking about products such as pineapples, apples, oranges, oil, those sorts of products where there's very little differentiation between products from different producers. Second one, firms are price takers, means that no one firm can set the price, so it's the market that actually sets the price. There's freedom of entry and exit. Freedom of entry ensures that any excessive profits will be driven down to the break-even level, and freedom of exit means that any losses will be eliminated by firms leaving the market, supply decreasing in the market, and prices rising upwards to eliminate the loss. And perfect information means that if there are a group of companies each selling, or a group of suppliers each selling bananas, then if one is selling at a higher price than the other, all consumers know that, and that particular firm won't sell any bananas at all. So they're the 4 main assumptions. Now we get on to an example of a perfectly competitive market. A number of years ago I was in Manila teaching in the MBA program, and I was in a car and getting driven around, shown around the city, and we were driving up to the highlands, and we went through a little village, and there were these pineapple stalls. And what you can see here in this picture is one pineapple stall, but the little town that I went to, there were probably about, from memory, 25 stalls on either side of the road, and they were just selling pineapples. So they weren't selling bananas or watermelons or anything else that you can see in the picture there, just pineapples. And cars were coming along the street, pulling up, loading their boot full of pineapples, and then driving off. Now this is probably the closest thing I've seen to a perfectly competitive market in operation. Pineapples were all the same, there were many buyers, many sellers, and the prices that the pineapples were selling for were pretty much the same up and down the street. So what we tend to do in microeconomics is we illustrate the operation of those sorts of markets using a 2-panel diagram. So on the left I've got the industry as a whole, and then on the right, a typical firm. I've got a typical firm operating in that industry. So what you can see in the industry diagram on the left is a demand curve and a supply curve, and industry output is 5,000. On the right, a typical firm is producing 50 units. Now this could be, what are they producing? It's going to be a homogeneous product. It could be pineapples, bananas, apples, oranges, those sorts of things are good examples. So each firm is producing roughly 50, so there's going to be 100 firms in this marketplace. So it's really the diagram on the left that determines the market price of P1. So aggregate demand and aggregate market supply determine the price of P1. So the supply curve in the industry component of the diagram, that is the horizontal summation of all of the individual marginal cost curves of the firms in the industry. So take the marginal cost curves of all of the individual firms in the industry, sum them horizontally, and that gives us the industry supply curve. The demand curve is made up of the summation of the demand curve of all of the consumers in the market. So the price is set at P1. If the price is P1, then the firm on the right hand side, the typical firm, will maximise profits by setting price equal to marginal cost. So if the price is P1, the firm will maximise profits by producing 50 units. Now at 50 units of output, reading off the ATC curve right here, production costs are ATC1. So for this firm, profit per unit is P1 minus ATC1, and total profit is P1 minus ATC1 multiplied by 50 units. So it's really this rectangle here, created by P1, ATC1 and 50 units, this rectangle, that is the profit for the firm. A couple of other key prices to note before we go on. The price P2 is the break-even price. Now if the price falls from P1 to P2, the firm is actually going to move down its marginal cost curve and reduce production to the point where P2 intersects marginal cost. That is break-even. At that point, the firm is earning enough revenue to cover its fixed costs, its variable costs and its opportunity costs. At a price of P3, that's another important point, because if the price falls below P3, the firm will actually shut down operations, because the price won't even be high enough to cover its variable operating costs. If the price is somewhere between P2 and P3, what you should have noted by now is that the firm can operate at a price between P2 and P3 temporarily, because at a price between P2 and P3, the firm is covering all of its variable costs and it's covering some of its fixed costs. So in the short run, it's better to cover some of your fixed costs and continue operating than shut down and cover none of them at all. So between P2 and P3, the firm will keep operating in the short term, and it will be covering some but not all of its fixed costs. So that is the two-panel diagram that we use to come to an understanding of how perfectly competitive markets operate. And so what I've got here is an increase in industry supply. So we're taking this model and we're starting to actually use it now. So we start off at the intersection of D and S1. So we start off with an equilibrium price of P1. At that price, each firm in the market, and we're going to assume that these firms have the same technologies, they have the same input prices, and so therefore they have the same cost curves. So if the price is P1, each of these firms will produce an output level Q1. Now let's assume that this is the market for pineapples, and all of a sudden we have a very good growing season. So the supply of pineapples is much greater than expected. The supply curve's out at S2. This is going to give us a price of P2, and at P2 each firm will be producing Q2 units of output. So this increase in supply has driven the price down, and each firm responds by cutting back their production. In fact, the example of pineapples is probably not a good example, because there's significant production lags in terms of, well, with all agricultural products. So let's think of a product whereby production is more immediate. So for whatever reason there's an increase in supply. It could be a boost in productivity, it could be more firms entering the industry. For whatever reason, supply increases from S to S2, the price drops, and firms respond by cutting back their production from Q1 to Q2. Now at a price level of P2 and a production level of Q2, that price of P2 is well below average total cost. So all firms in this market will be making a loss. Now, firms can actually sustain those losses for a short period of time, but eventually some firms will end up leaving the market because the opportunity cost of staying in this market is too great, i.e. these firms could actually take their capital and labour and expertise, move to another industry and make more accounting profit. So some firms will do that, and that will actually shift the supply curve from S2 back to S1. It will raise the price back up, and this process will continue until the prices return to approximately P1 again. So you need to understand how these two diagrams interrelate, and you also need to be able to manipulate the demand curve and supply curve and understand how firms actually respond to changes in demand and supply in the industry.